In 1871, a child spoke words she was never taught, names no one dared say, secrets no one survived knowing. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She simply remembered. People believed children were innocent because they forgot easily, but Catherine Doyle was different. She spoke of buried things, of deals made in whispers, of bodies placed where prayers couldn't reach. And the most terrifying part wasn't what she said. It was how calmly she said it, because Catherine never claimed the secrets were hers. She said they were given back. This is not a ghost story. This is not a legend. This is the true forgotten horror of a child who listened to the ground and spoke for what lived beneath it. You are watching Forgotten Remains. Listen carefully. Some stories don't want to be remembered, but they will be. The first time Catherine Doyle spoke, the room went quiet in a way that had nothing to do with respect. It happened on a cold March morning in 1871, inside a narrow stone house pressed against the fog-soaked hills of western Pennsylvania. Coal dust clung to everything there: walls, clothes, lungs. The Doyle family lived like most families did then, close together, quiet, careful, and fearful of God in the way people become when they believe He listens too closely. Catherine was 6 years old. She had not spoken since birth. No cries, no words, no sounds beyond breath and the soft shuffle of bare feet on wooden floors. Doctors called her simple. Priests said she was touched. Her mother, Eleanor Doyle, believed Catherine was waiting. For what? She never said aloud. That morning, Eleanor was kneading bread at the table when Catherine entered the kitchen. The girl stood very still, hands folded, eyes fixed not on her mother, but on the space behind her. Then Catherine spoke. "Tell him to stop digging," she said softly. "Father will reach bones that remember him." The bowl slipped from Eleanor's hands and shattered on the floor. Because Catherine had never learned how to speak, and because her father had left before dawn with a shovel, heading toward the old mine pit he had sworn, under oath and prayer, he would never return to. Eleanor fell to her knees, clutching Catherine's shoulders, searching her face for mockery, for madness, for anything human. But Catherine's eyes were calm, older than they should have been, as if she were reciting something already written. "Where did you hear that?" Eleanor whispered. Catherine tilted her head. "I didn't hear it," she said. "I remember it." By nightfall, word had spread through the settlement. By morning, men refused to enter the mine, and by the third day, something had begun whispering Catherine's name back to her. The Doyles tried to leave after that. They packed what little they owned and prepared to travel east toward Harrisburg, away from the hills, away from the pit, away from the way neighbors now crossed themselves when Catherine passed. But Catherine would not cross the property line. Each time Eleanor tried to guide her forward, the girl froze, muscles locked, breath shallow, eyes fixed on the soil beneath her feet. "There are mouths under here," Catherine said quietly. "They still know my name." That night, Catherine woke screaming for the first time in her life. Not crying, not calling for her mother, reciting. Names spilled from her mouth: men, women, children, some familiar, some long forgotten, some belonging to families who had buried coffins filled with stones because bodies were never found. She spoke dates. She spoke places. She spoke sins whispered only once, in darkness and never forgiven. Eleanor covered Catherine's mouth, begging her to stop, but the words pushed past her fingers, spoken with a voice that was not a child's. "She was there," Catherine said. She watched him lie. Eleanor's heart stopped. "Who?" she asked. Catherine's eyes rolled back just enough to show the whites. "The man you pray never wakes." The next morning, Reverend Thomas Hale arrived uninvited. He did not greet Catherine. He watched her. For a long time. "You've been allowing her to speak," he said finally, his voice low. "That was your first mistake. She only tells what she knows," Eleanor replied, her voice shaking. "No," Hale said. "She tells what remembers her." He knelt in front of Catherine and placed a Bible on the floor between them. "What is your name?" he asked. Catherine did not answer. "What is your name?" he repeated. The girl's lips parted slowly. "Catherine Doyle," she said. "Mary Wilkes. Jonah Bell. Samuel Klein. And the one you buried face down so he couldn't scream." Reverend Hale recoiled as if struck. No one else in the room breathed, because Samuel Klein had been the minister before him, and his grave had never been opened. That night, Catherine stopped sleeping. She sat upright in bed, eyes open, whispering to someone who stood just out of sight. When Eleanor asked who she was speaking to, Catherine answered gently. "They're lining up." "For what?" Eleanor asked. "To be remembered correctly." By the end of the week, 3 families had fled the settlement. By the end of the month, the mine collapsed without warning, sealing something inside that clawed at the walls for 2 days before going silent. And Catherine Doyle began drawing pictures, not with crayons, with charcoal taken from the hearth. She drew tunnels beneath houses, hands reaching upward, faces pressed flat against the earth, mouths open in soundless accusation. And in every drawing, always in the corner, a small child, standing calmly, holding a key. When Eleanor asked her what the key opened, Catherine smiled for the first time since she learned to speak. Everything they locked away, she said, and everything they shouldn't have. Far away, in places Catherine had never been, people began waking from dreams they did not recognize. Dreams of dirt-filled lungs, of prayers swallowed by soil, of a child's voice counting their sins with perfect accuracy. And somewhere beneath the Doyle house, something old shifted its attention, because Catherine Doyle had finally remembered how to listen, and it was listening back. The first death came quietly, as if ashamed of being noticed. Mrs. Abigail Mercer was found sitting upright in her parlor chair just after dawn, hands folded neatly in her lap, eyes wide open and dry. No signs of struggle. No wounds. No poison. The doctor said her heart had simply stopped. But Catherine Doyle had spoken her name the night before. Eleanor remembered it clearly. Catherine had been sitting at the table, tracing the grain of the wood with one finger, whispering softly. "Abigail Mercer," she had said. She kept the lock. Eleanor had asked what that meant. Catherine hadn't answered. When the news spread through the settlement, people began counting. They realized Catherine's whispered names were not random. They followed an order no one alive remembered agreeing to. At the funeral, Catherine stood apart from the mourners, staring at the coffin as it was lowered. She did not cry. She did not blink. "She won't stay," Catherine said suddenly. Eleanor grabbed her arm. "What do you mean?" "She never does," Catherine replied. "Not until the ground forgives her." That night, the coffin was found open. No footprints, no broken earth, no body. The inside of the lid, however, was covered in scratch marks, deep, frantic, and layered, as if made by someone with far more strength than Mrs. Mercer had possessed in life. After that, people stopped letting Catherine walk alone, but it didn't matter. She didn't need to go anywhere anymore. The secrets came to her. Men began waking in the night to hear a child's voice listing their names beside their beds. Women claimed their mirrors whispered dates they had tried to forget. Children pointed at corners and asked their parents why the buried people were angry. Catherine grew thinner, though she ate. Her voice grew steadier, calmer, as if practice made it stronger. Her eyes no longer focused on faces when she spoke. They tracked movement beneath the floor. Reverend Hale returned with others, men from neighboring towns, carrying Bibles, iron charms, and bottles of holy water. They surrounded Catherine in the Doyle home and demanded answers. "Tell us where the bodies are," one man said. Catherine looked up at him. "Which ones?" she asked politely. The room erupted into shouting. Eleanor fell to her knees, begging them to leave her daughter alone. Reverend Hale raised a hand for silence. "Ask her," he said carefully, "what she wants." Catherine tilted her head. "I don't want," she said. "I remember." She stepped forward and placed her palm flat against the floorboards. "They're closer than you think," she whispered, "and they're tired of holding their breath." The floor creaked, not from age, but from pressure below. The men stumbled back. That night, the ground behind the old mine split open, not collapsed, opened. A narrow seam in the earth revealed a tunnel not marked on any map, lined with rotting beams and symbols scratched into the walls. Inside were bones arranged carefully, deliberately, with names carved into stone beside them. Every name Catherine had spoken. And one more. Eleanor Doyle. When Eleanor confronted her daughter, Catherine did not deny it. "You haven't done anything," Eleanor cried. "Why is my name there?" Catherine looked confused. "Not you," she said. "The other one." Eleanor froze. "The woman who wore your face before you," Catherine continued. "She's the reason I came back wrong." Eleanor felt something cold bloom behind her eyes. "My mother died giving birth to me," she said slowly. Catherine shook her head. "No," she replied. "She was traded," Eleanor screamed. That scream carried through the hills, down into the tunnel, and something answered, low, wet, and patient. From that moment on, Catherine was never alone. People began seeing her standing beside figures no one else could see. Shadows lingered around her feet. Her reflection in glass no longer moved when she did. And then Catherine began telling the future. Not predictions. Appointments. 3 nights, she told Reverend Hale calmly. "Then you'll remember the rope." Hale tried to leave the settlement before sunset. He never made it past the creek. They found him hanging from a tree that had been struck by lightning years earlier. Dead wood, long hollowed out from within. His Bible lay open at his feet, its pages filled with handwriting that was not his own. Every page said the same thing. She remembers for U.S. That night, Catherine slept for the first time in weeks. She dreamed, and what she dreamed began walking. When Catherine Doyle woke from her sleep, the house no longer felt empty. It felt occupied, not crowded, organized, as if something had finally taken its proper place. Eleanor noticed it first in the morning light. The floorboards no longer creaked randomly. They responded. A step here, a pause there. The house breathed with intention, exhaling slowly through the cracks in the walls. Catherine sat at the table, hands folded, eyes dull with exhaustion, but peaceful. "You slept," Eleanor said, almost afraid to say it aloud. "Yes," Catherine replied. "They let me." "Who?" Eleanor whispered. Catherine looked toward the corner of the room, where the shadows bent unnaturally despite the rising sun. The ones who were forgotten wrong. By midday, the settlement had changed. People moved quietly now, not out of fear, but recognition. They felt watched, weighed, measured. The air carried a pressure that made confessions itch at the back of the throat. A man named Robert Pike collapsed while chopping wood, screaming that his hands weren't his anymore. He clawed at his palms until blood soaked the dirt, shouting that they belonged to someone buried beneath the chapel. Catherine had spoken his name 2 nights earlier. Children stopped playing near the creek. They said the water had started repeating things their parents whispered when they thought no one was listening. And beneath the Doyle house, something began knocking. Not violently, politely. 3 knocks. Always 3. At sunset, Eleanor finally asked the question she had been avoiding. "What are you to them?" she asked her daughter. Catherine considered this. "I'm the ledger," she said. "And the door," Eleanor's breath caught. "And when the door opens," Catherine looked at her mother with a sadness far too old for her face. "Everyone remembers," she said. "And remembering hurts." That night, the knocking became footsteps. Slow, measured, heavy with purpose. The cellar door, nailed shut years ago, began to sweat. Rust bled down the hinges like dried tears. Eleanor backed away, clutching a candle, whispering prayers that felt thin and brittle. Catherine stood. "They're here for the names that weren't spoken," she said. The door did not burst open. It opened gently. What emerged was not a monster. It was worse. Figures stepped into the cellar light, human in shape, wrong in detail. Skin stretched too tightly. Eyes sunken deep with dirt still packed beneath the lids. Mouths sewn shut with blackened thread, each stitch carved from bone. They did not walk. They remembered forward. Each one stopped in front of Catherine and bowed its head. Eleanor fell to the floor, unable to scream. One figure raised its hand and pointed, not at Catherine, but at Eleanor. "She wore her face," the thing said, though its mouth never moved. "She took her place," Eleanor sobbed, shaking her head. "I didn't know," she begged. "I swear I didn't know." Catherine stepped between them. "She didn't choose it," she said. "But she kept it." The figures turned away. "For now," they replied together. Then, they turned toward the settlement. By morning, the church bell rang without being touched. By noon, 6 people were dead, found in places that matched confessions they had never spoken aloud. One drowned in a dry well. One suffocated beneath his own floorboards. One was found sitting peacefully at her kitchen table, hands folded, just like Mrs. Mercer. Catherine did not speak their names. She didn't have to anymore. The town tried to burn the Doyle house that night. They gathered torches, shouting prayers turned sharp with desperation. But when the flames touched the walls, the fire went out, as if swallowed. The ground trembled. From beneath the earth came a sound like 1,000 breaths being released at once. Catherine stepped onto the porch. "You can't stop remembering," she said gently. "You can only decide who remembers you." One by one, the townspeople dropped their torches, because they could feel it now. The weight beneath their feet. The listening soil. The patient hunger of the past. That night, Eleanor finally understood. Catherine was never cursed. She was appointed, and the reckoning had only just begun. By the 4th week, the settlement no longer spoke Catherine Doyle's name aloud. They used gestures instead. A glance toward the hills. A hand lowered to the floor. A silence held too long. Because names had power now, and everyone understood who kept them. Catherine no longer walked like a child. Her steps were measured, deliberate, as if she moved along paths already worn beneath the skin of the world. Wherever she stood, the ground felt thinner. People swore they could hear breathing below her feet, shallow and patient. Eleanor followed her daughter everywhere, not to protect her, to watch for the moment Catherine would stop being hers. That moment came at the creek. Catherine knelt by the water, staring into the reflection, not at her face, but beneath it. Her lips moved silently. Eleanor touched her shoulder. "Who are you speaking to?" Catherine did not look up. "The ones who were traded," she said. "The ones who were named something else so they could be kept." Eleanor's chest tightened. "Traded by whom?" Catherine finally met her eyes. "By your mother," she said. "And the women before her." The world tilted. Eleanor staggered back, memories rearranging themselves with brutal clarity. Stories that never made sense. Births that came too soon. Funerals held without bodies. The way women in her family vanished quietly and were never spoken of again. "You're lying," Eleanor whispered. Catherine shook her head slowly. "No," she said. "I'm finishing the sentence. That night, Eleanor dreamed of standing in a long line of women, all wearing her face. Each one held a child by the hand. Each child stared straight ahead, mouths closed, eyes wide with knowing. At the end of the line stood Catherine, older, taller, unmoving. When Eleanor woke, her fingernails were packed with dirt. The next day, the remembering spread beyond the settlement. Travelers arrived and refused to leave. They claimed the road bent back toward the hills no matter which direction they walked. Maps became useless. Compasses spun. Horses refused to move past the creek. One man screamed when he saw Catherine. "She's the one from the pit," he cried. She counted us. He was dead by nightfall, his lungs filled with earth though he had never touched the ground. Catherine began drawing again. Not tunnels this time, family trees. But the branches curved inward, looping back on themselves, names repeating across generations like a stutter in time. Some names were scratched out. Others were circled, over and over, until the paper tore. Eleanor recognized her own name in every loop. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, her voice breaking. "Why us?" Catherine set down the charcoal. "Because you kept the secret," she said softly. "And secrets rot faster than bodies." That evening, the figures returned. Not just a few this time, dozens. They emerged from the ground around the settlement, beneath homes, beneath the church, beneath the very roads people had walked their entire lives. Some were children. Some were women. Some were men who still wore the expressions they died with. They did not attack. They waited. Catherine stepped forward, standing before them like a witness before a jury. "Is it time?" she asked. A low murmur rose from the ground, a sound like soil shifting under rain. "Yes," they answered. "Begin with the mothers." Eleanor screamed Catherine's name. Catherine turned back once. "I tried to be quiet," she said. "But you taught me to remember." The ground opened beneath the first house at dusk, and the remembering moved on. The first house did not collapse. It opened. The floorboards separated like fingers unclenching, revealing a hollow space beneath, clean, deliberate, shaped by hands that had worked carefully in darkness. The woman who lived there, Martha Keene, stood frozen in her doorway as the earth beneath her feet exhaled. She had been mid-prayer. She did not finish it. The ground pulled her down gently, almost respectfully, as if reclaiming something that had been borrowed too long. There was no screaming, no thrashing, just the sound of soil settling back into place, smooth and unbroken. By morning, the house stood empty, untouched. Everyone understood then. This was not destruction. This was correction. Catherine walked through the settlement as the earth worked beneath her. Opening and closing in places no one had marked. No one had remembered. Women vanished first. Always the eldest. Always those whose names appeared again and again in Catherine's drawings. Eleanor followed her daughter at a distance, hollow-eyed, whispering apologies to no one in particular. At the church, Catherine stopped. She placed her hand flat against the door. "They hid them under prayer," she said. "They thought that made it holy." The bell rang once. The church sank halfway into the ground, settling crookedly like a head bowed too late. Inside, beneath the altar, they found the remains of infants wrapped in linen, each tagged with a name that had never been recorded in any book. Eleanor collapsed. "They were afraid," she sobbed. "They didn't know what else to do." Catherine looked at her with something close to mercy. "They knew," she said. "They just wanted silence more." That night, Eleanor finally confessed. She spoke of her grandmother, of deals made in whispers, of children exchanged for protection, for food, for safety, of how the hills demanded balance, and how the women learned to give it what it wanted, quietly, efficiently, generation after generation. "I tried to stop it," Eleanor said, her voice breaking. "I married away. I prayed harder. I thought if I stayed good enough." "You stayed," Catherine said gently. "And staying was enough." The figures gathered again, closer now. They no longer bowed. They watched. Catherine stood among them, small and steady, as if the ground itself held her upright. "There is one left," she said. Eleanor felt the words before she understood them. "No," she whispered. "Please." Catherine turned to her. "You were the last keeper," she said, "and I was the door you locked." The ground beneath Eleanor's feet began to soften, breathing warm and damp like a living thing. Eleanor dropped to her knees. "I loved you," she said. "I love you." Catherine knelt in front of her, placing her small hands over Eleanor's. "I know," she said. "That's why you get to choose how it ends." The earth waited. The figures leaned in. For the first time, Catherine's voice trembled. "Say it," she whispered. "Say the truth out loud." Eleanor closed her eyes. And finally, after generations of silence, she spoke every name she knew. Every child. Every woman. Every deal. The ground stilled. The figures began to fade, their forms dissolving back into soil, bone into memory. Catherine stood alone. When Eleanor opened her eyes, her daughter was no longer there. Only a small handprint remained in the dirt, pressed deep, as if holding the ground closed. And beneath the hills, something ancient settled back into sleep. Satisfied. Almost. They never found Catherine Doyle. Not in the hills, not in the mine, not beneath the houses that had opened and closed like mouths learning restraint. She was simply gone. By dawn, the settlement was quiet in a way it had never been before. Not tense, not watchful, but hollow. As if something essential had been removed, and the world was still adjusting to the absence. Eleanor woke alone on the dirt where she had collapsed. The handprint was still there. Small, perfect, pressed deeper than any child's hand could have managed. When Eleanor tried to stand, the ground resisted, not trapping her, but reminding her. A pressure, gentle and firm, as if to say, "Remember where you are allowed to walk." She left that morning. No one stopped her. No one watched. The road did not bend this time. It carried her straight out of the hills and into a life that never fit again. She spoke little. She never remarried. She never stayed anywhere long enough to be known. But everywhere Eleanor went, strange things followed. Infants who would not stop staring at the floor. Children who spoke names that made adults go pale. Dreams of knocking, 3 times, always 3, coming from beneath beds, beneath churches, beneath the earth itself. Eleanor lived another 27 years. On her deathbed, she asked the nurse one question. "Does the ground remember us when we're gone?" The nurse did not answer, because the floor beneath the bed had begun to breathe. After Eleanor Doyle died, the settlement was abandoned within a decade. Crops failed. Wells filled with silt overnight. Foundations cracked without cause. Travelers complained of hearing whispers beneath their boots, speaking names they did not recognize, but felt guilty for forgetting. By 1901, the hills reclaimed everything. Houses sank. Roads vanished. The mine collapsed in on itself, sealing every tunnel for good. And then, in 1919, a surveyor mapping the region discovered something strange. Beneath a layer of compacted earth, he found a flat stone, smooth, deliberate, untouched by rot. Carved into it were dozens of names, arranged carefully, lovingly. At the bottom was one final marking, not a name, a handprint, small, exact, pressed into the stone as if it had been soft when touched. The surveyor reported nightmares after that. So did his wife. So did their children. The stone disappeared before it could be studied further. No record of Catherine Doyle was ever found in census books after 1871. No grave, no death notice, no marriage record, only fragments. A child's voice recalled by the elderly, drawings found in abandoned houses, family trees that looped back on themselves, and stories passed down in whispers, always ending the same way. If a child knows too much, it's not because they learned it. It's because someone beneath the ground is still speaking. And sometimes, the earth chooses a listener. Somewhere, even now, a child is standing very still, hands folded, listening carefully, waiting to remember what comes next. History tells us that time buries everything. But the truth is, some things are buried on purpose. Catherine Doyle was not cursed. She was chosen. Chosen to remember what generations tried to erase. Chosen to speak when silence became a crime. Chosen to open a door no one wanted unlocked. Her name vanished from records. Her body was never found. But her work was finished. And yet, the ground still listens. If a child ever looks at you and speaks a truth you never shared, don't ask where they learned it. Ask who finally decided to speak. Because some secrets don't die. They wait. You've been watching Forgotten Remains, where the past is never finished, and forgetting is the most dangerous lie of all.